Okay, guys, what is up? It's the Tominator, and I think it's about time to start making some predictions for the 2019 Olympia. Well, actually, with only 1 week to go, it's probably past time. But the reason I waited so long is because I've been around the block a couple of times now, and have found that when it comes to IFBB bodybuilding competitions, there's often last minute changes to the roster. So I wanted to sort of wait till all the pieces were on the board so we know what we're dealing with here. And this contest proved no exception when we found out just last week that Hadi Choopan actually got his US visa, finally enabling him to compete at the Mr. Olympia. Given the existence of Trump's travel ban, I consider this to be something of a minor miracle and was definitely not expecting them to come through. But hey man, it's a welcome addition and I'm all for it. With no Phil Heath, no Sean Roden, no Big Ramy, and no Kai Green, we desperately needed another star to fill the void in that top six, and Hadi totally fits the bill. Now, I'm not saying he's as good as a Sean Roden or a Phil Heath, because frankly he's not. But what makes it so exciting in Hadi's case is that we've never seen him compared to most of these top guys. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I'll talk more about the Hadi situation in a couple minutes, but like usual, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And that 10th place spot is tricky. There's about 3 or 4 guys who could legitimately claim it. Juan Morel, Michael Lockett, John De La Rosa, Akeem Williams even, if he comes in shape for a change. I expect there to be a pretty good battle for 10th this year. And like usual, it's probably going to come down to who brings the best conditioning to the stage. So I'm going to go with my gut here and say Juan Morel will come out on top of that group. I projected he'd finish 10th last year too, and kind of got burned by that prediction, but this year with the shallower lineup and with Juan looking arguably better than ever, I think he can do it. But so could any of those other 3 guys I just mentioned, so he's going to have to bring his A game to solidify his spot in the top 10. Although Morel's made improvements to his lower body, his legs are still the weakest of the bunch, but the dense mass that he packs through his back, pecs, and shoulders, plus a chiseled midsection, should be enough to give him the edge. At number 9, I'm going to go ahead and slot in Nathan DeAsha. This one is tough because realistically, I think there's another battle for 7th, and that is going to be between the likes of DeAsha, Cederick, and Steve Coock Low. And of those 3, DeAsha has placed the highest the past couple years. So why am I sort of shortchanging him here? Well, there's a couple reasons, and they mostly have to do with the other 2 guys. But as for Nathan, I feel like he fell off a bit when Hadi essentially took him to school at the Vancouver Pro. That was a huge blow to his momentum and even his reputation to get so thoroughly trounced by a former 212 competitor. Now, granted, he was a little off at that show, so we'll see if he can bounce back at the Olympia. But for now, on paper, I'd say DeAsha has lost some steam, which is why he could end up slipping to 9th. I have Steve Coock Low coming in a solid 8th. This would be 2 spots up from his 10th place finish last year. Steve's got the size and the grainy conditioning to outmuscle just about everyone except Roelly Winklaar, but he lacks separation and back thickness big time. These weaknesses really hurt him standing next to the top dogs and will likely prevent him from cracking into that top 6.
But I think there could be some surprises in there too.
Like who?
Man, I have a good feeling about Steve Coock Low this year, actually.
Yeah. A few people have said that. We had Steve Coock Low on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. I think he could really could turn it up.
In 7th, I've got Cederick Mcmillian, and honestly, that's probably a little optimistic to have him beating someone like Nathan DeAsha, given Cedric's lousy track record at the Olympia, but I can't help to continue to have hope for Big Mac. This is a guy who's so genetically gifted, so balanced and proportionate, he should be a perennial top 4 or 5, but he just never seems to bring the necessary conditioning to the so-called Super Bowl of bodybuilding. I hope that this year proves to be the exception and he'll exceed expectations, but for now, I can't in good conscience put him any higher than 7th. Rounding out the top 6, I have Luke Sando. Luke has got to be the biggest breakout star of 2019. After he basically came out of nowhere to finish 3rd in a stacked Arnold Classic Ohio lineup, beating a very good version of Cedric in the process, he really put himself on people's radar. Sando is massive, thick, and very complete, with seemingly no lagging body parts. The only question mark is the conditioning. If he manages to nail that again to the same degree he did at the Arnold, he could finish top 6 no problem. Okay, so at number 5, things get tricky again. Do you go with Dexter Jackson, or do you go with Hadi Choopan? On the one hand, it's hard to bet against the winningest pro bodybuilder of all time. On the other hand, you can only stave off Father Time for so long, and judging by his 7th place finish in 2018, his lowest placing since 2001, it seems like Dexter is finally starting to slow down. But then again, he didn't have his nutritionist George Farah, nor his favorite trainer Charles Glass in his corner with him last year. And since they teamed up again this year, he had a bounce-back victory at the Tampa Pro and looks to be back in usual Dexter form. But even still, Hadi looked absolutely dominant at the Vancouver Pro, and in the fictional comparison I put together of him versus Dex, Hadi came out on top in the majority of the mandatory poses. So I gotta go with Dexter in 5th. I'm sorry, dude, a big part of me wants you to win one last Olympia and ride off into the sunset in a blaze of glory, but realistically, I don't think it's in the cards. So yeah, needless to say, I have Hadi Choopan landing in 4th. Some of you guys probably think even that's a little low and seem to view Hadi as the best thing since sliced bread. And while he is very impressive, he's not unstoppable. He still has weaknesses. His triceps are subpar, which makes his arms look stringy from certain angles, and that's going to be exposed standing next to the likes of the top guns. His back double biceps lacks detail, plus don't forget he's short and still giving up many pounds to a lot of these larger framed opponents. Plus, at the time of this video, we're still not even sure whether Hadi is going to do the open or whether he's going to stick with 212. So just quickly, if he stays in 212, it's pretty much a done deal. Derek Lunsford would be his only real competition, but I think he can beat the young Lunsford pretty handily still at this point. But if, as I'm assuming, given the greater prize money and status, he elects to enter the open category, I think 4th place is a probable finish for the Persian Wolf. The way I see it, the only way he's cracking into the top 3 is if one or more of these top tier guys is off. In that case, sure, he could possibly sneak his way into 3rd or even 2nd, though I seriously doubt that all 3 would be off, so I don't foresee a scenario where Hadi Choopan can actually win the Open. Let's be reasonable here, guys. It's not happening. 4th in the world is still amazingly good, though. Okay, so now we move on to the top 3. This is the cream of the crop, and these guys are here for a reason. In 3rd, I have William Bonac, who's similar to Hadi in terms of being a stockier giant killer with ripped conditioning. These guys are like mini mass monsters doing damage out there. But Bonac is more balanced with fuller muscle bellies and a better back. I think way too many people are sleeping on this guy because they don't personally like his physique. Yes, his midsection ain't pretty, certainly it's terrible compared to Hadi's excellent set of abs, but that's really his only weak body part. So in fact, I could easily see Bonac finishing as high as 2nd this year, because I would not be surprised if one of the top 2 slightly misses the mark. William has proven himself over the past 3 or 4 years as one of the most consistent bodybuilders on the planet. He's always in peak shape and has world-class detail and separation. For that reason, I simply can't see him falling any lower than 3rd in this depleted lineup. The main thing, perhaps the only thing holding him back, is his short stature and blocky waistline. If Bonac was just another 2 or 3 inches taller, he'd probably be the favorite to win it all. The one other concern going into this year's Olympia is that he's no longer with longtime coach Neil Hill. Will this negatively affect his prep, or does Bonac know his body well enough at this point that a coach is no longer necessary? We'll have to wait and find out. Alright, so number 2 for me is Roelly Winklaar. I know many of you believe Roelly is going to be the next champ, and that's entirely reasonable to assume given that he was the highest placing bodybuilder in last year's Olympia and already beat all of these guys just 1 year ago. He was also voted the first ever People's Champ as well, so he's certainly got the popular vote and seems like a safe bet. The issue with Roelly is that he faltered at the 2019 Arnold Classic, giving up a lot of ground to some of these other guys who were chasing him, so momentum is no longer on his side. And at age 42, time is no longer on his side either, guys. Roelly may very well have already hit his peak last year, and that's the very best we'll ever see him. I hope that's not the case, but not too many bodybuilders continue to improve into their 40s like Roden or Dexter. So here's the deal. If Roelly can duplicate or even better his conditioning from last year, it stands to reason he's got a great shot at winning the title. But if he's even a fraction short of that mark, I don't think he can stave off a strong charge from Brandon Curry, who's my pick for number 1. So yeah, I already did a full video on why I think Brandon is most likely to be crowned the next Mr. O. Everything seems to be falling in his favor at the moment, from his continued progress show after show, year after year, and all the momentum he now carries into the Olympia as the reigning Arnold Classic champ. Also, his physique itself would seem to be totally in line with what the IFBB are looking for, a freaky, massive guy who still maintains symmetrical proportions with a trim waistline. And politically speaking, Brandon Curry is head and shoulders above the rest of these contenders. He's the only top bodybuilder remaining who's American-born and speaks fluent English. So love it or hate it, I think that goes a long way when we're talking about who's the best ambassador for the sport. Business-wise, the IFBB and AMI are probably secretly rooting for Curry to win like there's no tomorrow. The one caveat with Brandon is that he still has somewhat thick skin. It's not the same sort of paper-thin look that William Bonac brings or that Phil Heath was famous for, where you can see every little detail and muscle fiber firing. So his separation suffers a bit compared to guys like that. Basically what I'm trying to say is that if Brandon isn't 100% on, he could easily lose this thing. So moral of the story is that nothing is set in stone and we'll just have to wait and see who really brings it next weekend. This entire list was essentially an on-paper sort of thing, but bodybuilding shows almost never pan out according to on-paper predictions. There's inevitably an upset here or there where somebody messes up and disappoints, and another comes out of left field to leapfrog a bunch of ostensibly better bodybuilders. But anyway, guys, that's my thoughts going into the 2019 Mr. Olympia. Do you agree with this order, or would you rank them differently? Let us know your predictions in the comments below. Please give the video a like and subscribe for more if you enjoyed, and until next time, this has been the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.